Okay, I'm very tired. Anyway, we are continuing on with the Civic engine replacement. And once again, I'm just going to place some cameras and let them run, and you can watch the goings on, and I'll edit it later. Have a look. Okay, well, it's later, and here we are. We're going to start with a valve adjustment. As you can see, I've already removed the valve cover and gone into hyper pursuit mode. Well, not exactly, just sort of sped up the video. You can watch the valve adjustment video that I did for more specifics on this, because it's basically the same, but the important thing is to make sure you're on the base circle when you're making the adjustment. Valve adjustments are things that require practice, patience, and skill. So give yourself some time. You're not necessarily going to get it right the first time. So now that my valve adjustment's done, I put the valve cover back on, and I've installed my handy dandy seat belt, and I hooked onto the front there, and I hooked onto the outlet of the coolant pipe. This creeper was really handy in moving this thing around. As you can see, this is not like those heavy V8s. You can pretty much just bring it around where you want it to. In fact, I could deadlift it, but I don't really feel like I need anything to prove. But now that it's all valve adjusted and new timing belt and water pump, be sure to see the video on that if you want to see that. We're just gonna put everything back on it. So we're gonna go in reverse direction of all the stuff that we took off that's laying over there in the corner. I like to keep all my fasteners and everything together, so everything that's laying down there has its fasteners with it so that they're easy to find. And now I'm just trying to position the engine so that it's hanging, somewhat straight. As straight as it can be, really. Fun. Oh, this is so exciting. Hey, watch him lift the engine. And what I did was I lifted it up high enough to where it was at a comfortable height to where I could just work on it. Have it right there in front of me. That's the beauty of having it out of the car, is that you can pretty much put it where you want it with the right tools. So what are we going to do first? Can't remember. The flex plate. Be sure to see that basic parts of the engine video where we talk about the difference between a flywheel or a flex plate. If you had a manual transmission, you would be putting on a flywheel now. Ooh, there's some thunder for you. It's raining today while I'm doing my voiceover, but I'm not afraid, and then I don't think you should be either. So we've got the flex plate on. And what are we doing next here? Let's see what the fat man does next. He moves the cart. Ooh, that's special. Alright. I can't quite remember. I think I remember. Yes, it's the coolant pipe that comes off the back of the water pump. That's a pipe that runs along the back of the engine underneath the intake. There's a big O-ring on one side of it. Not a bad idea to replace it now, but this is a budget job. But what I went and did over there was I put a little silicone paste on the O-ring itself so that it was lubed up a little bit. I left the PCV box in the back of the engine there. I was able to fish it in behind everything and put it into the back of the water pump, and get the fasteners threaded by hand before I got out my impact gun here. But I was able to run them down and get them started to avoid cross-threading the assembly. But that's all that holds it on, is that thermostat assembly on the opposite side. Had this not been a budget build, I might have considered doing a thermostat at the same time, and I prefer Honda thermostats over the aftermarket thermostats. Hold them up side by side and you'll see why. Next we've got, I believe I'm putting that's the oil pressure switch on the back of this, or is it the knock sensor? I can't remember. But I think at the end of the video I show a detail up underneath the intake. But it's either the oil pressure switch or the knock sensor. I can't remember which one that I just put in there. Ended up breaking the knock sensor on this quite accidentally. It gets pretty hot underneath the intake and things get brittle. I'm installing the lower alternator bracket now. There's just two 14s that hold that to the back of the engine block. But here in a minute I'm going to show you a little trick that I do. Anytime I install an alternator, there's a little metal sleeve inside that bracket that if you knock it back in the opposite direction, it makes installing the alternator so much easier. So if you're doing this on the car and you need to put an alternator on, just give that little sleeve a couple of whacks with a hammer, it'll move enough to make it really easy to install that alternator. And then once you tighten it down, it sort of pinches back in place. I think that's a pretty smart design the way they did that, because it helps if it gets all rusted up and everything else. That upper bracket actually goes into the water pump, and I make sure that I have the alternator and everything hooked up and it can move freely before I tighten down that 14 that holds that bracket and the water pump together. This is so that the alternator's got some swing to it, because if you tighten it, you can tighten it down in a number of different positions. You could tighten it down in a position to where the alternator wouldn't move. So I'm just running that fastener down with my 1/4-inch air ratchet there. Not tight, just enough to make it snug. And then I'm making sure the alternator can move, putting it about in the center, and then I just nail that 14 down. Then I know that my alternator's got plenty of swing. And that's what I'm checking right there, to make sure that it can move back and forth freely, so that I can install the belt easily. Next up, removing the tape that they put over the exhaust holes on the cylinder head, and get all that stuff off. And I'm going to try and dig up, there's the exhaust manifold there. You may notice from the first movie, or maybe remember from the first movie, that the exhaust manifold on this engine was cracked. So I talked about the possibility of welding it, but that's a sometimes. It's a maybe. You're much better off with a new one, but if you're in a pinch, I have welded them in the past, and they have lasted a good long time before they started leaking again. But there's the key. They did start leaking again after a while. There was a little plug there that I had to remove from that was installed at the manufacturer for the O2 sensor. And now I'm digging up, I believe, the gasket. Yeah, I took the gasket off the old one. Yeah, I'm going to slip I'm actually reusing the old gasket. Once again, it's a budget build. But these metal gaskets, once you tighten these things down, it didn't leak. And I didn't expect that it would leak. Some gaskets you can reuse. Those metal ones, yeah. And, well, it didn't leak. There's also a bracket on the lower part of the exhaust manifold, once you get all the fasteners on there, that you also need to install. And what I do whenever I install these is I make sure all the fasteners are in place, and I also loosely put that bracket on, just finger tighten that, so that as you tighten the manifold, you don't put yourself in a position to where you can't install that bracket, because the manifold will draw up to the engine. And if you don't have that bracket installed, you may not be able to insert the fasteners. So try to put everything in by hand before you commit. It's like buying on eBay, commit to buy kind of thing. Before you commit to buy, make sure you got everything running finger tight. That way you don't have to fight those fasteners. See, that's the last thing I tighten there, is that bracket, because now I know it's properly located on the block and it's not going to go anywhere. Yay! Now the O2 sensor, I just brought that over. Something I did not show, take a little bit of anti-seize. Normally new O2 sensors come with a little tube of it, and put it on the threads. Threads only, don't put it on the sensor. Put it on the threads when you install it, and the next guy that has to take it out to replace it is going to thank you. Because if you don't put that on there, well, and by the way, I haven't run into an O2 sensor yet that wasn't 7/8 in size. So here I'm using a 7/8 inch wrench just to snug it down. You don't have to kill it, you just need to run it down. Now we're coming in with the shield, which you can fish the wire through the access hole there, and it's just held down by a few fasteners on the outside. And being an aftermarket unit, those fasteners are normally 12 millimeter, but these are 13 millimeter, so I had to go and find me the correct socket, because I didn't have the right one to begin with. So there's actually a cut there where I had to go back and get a different socket. Or maybe I did remember from the first time taking that apart. Either way, now the shielding's down and the whole front of the engine, well, almost the whole front of the engine is done. Next up, I believe, yes, we have the AC compressor bracket / there's an engine mount thing off the front of this. Just a couple of brackets on the front. This holds the air conditioning compressor in place. It's just held down by 4 fasteners. I needed to transfer it over, and I think I dropped one there that I needed to transfer to get it up on there. Simple, straightforward stuff. Just hunks of metal that you're bolting together. Not brain surgery here. And most engines aren't. I mean, engines, there's a lot that you disconnect and connect, but just think of it as one step at a time. Like here, I'm working on the front of the engine. I get everything attached there and just keep working my way around. Just, you know, it's methodical. It's not really rocket science. I mean, just about anybody that works on cars can take things apart. Putting them back together is the tricky part. But if you leave yourself with little breadcrumbs like I do with keeping the fasteners and everything all together, it makes it a lot easier. And yes, that was a fastener that dropped down. That is one of the fasteners that I barely threaded back in that holds the ground strap to the power steering pump bracket, which is what I just installed there. And I was able to find it. Lucky me. Let's see. Where are we going next? I think now that I've got all that together, yes. Going to move the old block out of the way. Take that someplace safe. Haha. And we're going to mate up the transmission. It was much easier to do the stuff that I did here before installing the transmission. I just did it that way, especially getting to the stuff on the back of the engine and the intake manifold as well. It's just a lot easier to access some of those fasteners that hold the transmission together. So I'm just, you know, I've done it enough times where I know kind of, okay, well, I'm going to do this part first and then move on to the next, so that I don't work myself into a position where I make my life harder by installing something that's going to block something else off when I try to put it together. I like this shot here. Here it comes. Engine's coming down. Then suddenly it's on your face. Well, oh no, that's later on. Sorry. Spoiler alert. Oh, yes, I am having fun with this. I hope you are too. So as you can see, the engine's never going to mate up to that transmission like that, but luckily it's light. And you can just pick it up and put it on there. It's almost like working on a tractor, or a light little tractor. So I'm just going to try to rest it up on its oil pan. It's an aluminum oil pan. I have no fear of it denting. Yeah, see that little movement right there of the camera? In the not too distant future, that camera fell off of its perch, and I'm going to have to get up and rescue it. And I lost the footage of it falling. I was hoping to actually show that in this video, but I guess it lost its memory due to the shock and the trauma of those few seconds after it fell, so I wasn't able to utilize that footage. But the camera's okay because the show must go on, and it knows it, and I know it, so we're all hard workers here at EricTheCarGuy's shop. Now that we got things relatively close, so much easier to do this outside the car. Some of you have asked me, Eric, why didn't you just leave the transmission in the car? Seriously, look how I'm doing this here. If I was doing this in the car, I'd be fighting this the whole time. To me, it's just easier to do it this way. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to line up the dowels. There's two of them, one on each side. I've got one of the dowels started, and I'm just going to get the closest bolt here and thread it in by hand. And in my opinion, once you've got one bolt threaded, when you're mating up a transmission, whether it be automatic, manual, whatever, you get the one bolt in, the rest you're home free. So just make sure you've got a good bite on the threads, so that way you can use that one fastener to pivot the engine / transmission around, so that you can get it all mushed back together. And here's my new camera angle. Isn't it special? Eric, put it in the right hole. Yes, put it in the right hole, you fool. Yes, the brackets go in the front. They hold the O2 sensor connector on, and the, what was that? On a manual transmission, it's reverse lights. I can't remember what's the other thing, but I know that the O2 sensor connector goes onto that little bracket. So try not to lose those brackets. I see lots of engines, transmissions, things come in with those missing parts because you just didn't feel like putting it in there, lost it, whatever. Make the effort. Be a professional. That's a lot of fun threading bell housing bolts in, I know. But it's kind of neat seeing the old dark transmission up against the freshly painted engine. Kind of a neat little contrast there. You get to see the two. It's like those mechanical drawings, which I always liked to look at as a kid, like in Popular Mechanics and stuff, where they did these cutaways and all that kind of thing. Seeing all the stuff that was on the inside. Loved it. I guess that's why I do this today. So now that we have all of the bolts hand tightened in there, I'm going to run them down a little bit at a time. Don't just take one all the way down and set for kill. Just work your way around.
And if you notice it binding or anything, stop. Stop and take a look what's going on. I mean, the thing should slide together like you see it here. If you got a big gap and you're tightening something down and it's starting to get tighter and tighter and it's not coming together, stop. If not, and you hear the clunk or a crack or something like that, it's too late. So give yourself some time, work methodically, and watch out for things that get into a bind. But like you see here, these two pieces of metal should mate up perfectly. There shouldn't be any binding. If there is binding, stop, take it apart, find out what's binding it up. Yay, exciting. The two are now one again. Well, not again, for the first time. For the first time, these two are together, and it looks like they're getting along famously. And don't forget about that one fastener that goes in from the opposite direction on the back there, which I just nailed down. Now we're going to reposition our seatbelt, or whatever you want to call it, or load spreader, or whatever. Now I can move it. I had it hooked onto the engine mount boss in the front there, but if you're going to install the engine, that wouldn't be the best place to put your mount now, so I moved it over to the alternator bracket and went straight through the hole where the alternator was, and I have no fear of that going anywhere now since it's all fastened together. And these are pretty much the same places that I used when I removed the engine. And on the transmission here, there's a bracket. I believe that bracket's there for exactly this, for pulling the engine and transmission out. And that's another thing, for those of you that questioned why I didn't leave the transmission inside the car. Because it's there, you can gain purchase here on the transmission and lift the whole assembly out. Whereas if you're just lifting the engine out, it'd be rather precarious to do it like I had it when I first started this video on that outlet, that coolant outlet on the top of the engine there. Since that was nice just for the engine, but for the engine and transmission, if you're doing a lot of moving around, it could have slipped off that little pipe there. So you're much safer doing it like this. So now going to lift it up so I can install the rest of the junk on this engine. And I won't bore you with me pumping this thing all day. But I got, yes, slowly going up, and through the magic of editing, we can watch it slowly rise. Oh yes, here it comes. How exciting. That's what we like about Eric the Car Guy videos. It's the detail, the drama. Oh, there it is. Now it's all the way up. Now it's at a nice working height for this guy here. And I'm installing a ratchet on the front. It's a 17mm fastener in the front of that crankshaft. How you like this angle? I like it a lot. And what I'm doing is I'm installing the fasteners that hold the flex plate to the torque converter. If you don't do that, you're not going to go anywhere at all, because the engine will spin, but the transmission will not. You need them both to spin together. What I do is I take all the fasteners and run them in by hand first. I spin it around, put a fastener in, and keep doing it. And make sure you get them snug, because as you're spinning it around, if you leave them too loose, they may come up in a bind against the block. If they do, turn it in the opposite direction. But you want to make sure that you've got all the fasteners for the flex plate in first before you start tightening them. The reason for this is the same with anything else. If you tighten something down, you possibly make it so that you can't take your next fastener and put it in because you put it into a bind. So now I'm just cranking them around and tightening them all up. Then I've got the cover here for the torque converter flex plate assembly. Real simple there. And then there's a brace that goes between the bottom of the transmission and the engine block. This is just sort of an extension, to sort of a truss to help keep it all together and nice and tight. And that's just 4 fasteners that hold that guy on. Yay. Now what are you going to do? Take your ratchet back. That's a good idea. Oh, here's the cool one. Oh, on your face. Thought I was going to drop it on your face. I didn't. Let's see. Yes, once again, the detail and the drama of driving the engine around. What are we doing now, Eric? Oh, yes. Now it's time for our intake manifold, and they put duct tape over the holes. And yes, I did reuse the gasket. Once again, budget build. It was not a problem. It was not damaged in any way. So I just went for it and said, what the heck, and save the guy that owns this car some money. With the intake manifold, you slide it up onto the studs that are sticking up off there. I should do a video on how to remove studs sometimes. That way, because that's very helpful when you want to... ooh, an eBay item I'm bidding on. That's something for you in the future, by the way. Anyway, getting back to the intake manifold and the studs on there, I just take all those fasteners and try to put them on, and here I am looking to see if the VTEC solenoid would be a good time to put that on or not. But given that I still have a bunch of stuff to do with the intake manifold, I decide against it and pull it away. But I get all the 12mm fasteners ready on the intake manifold. Once you've got one of them in, it's going to hang there real nice. And you can really only gain access with a wrench for these top ones. And start in the center and work your way out is the best way to do these. So I'm starting with one of the middle fasteners, and I'm ending with the outer fasteners, as you can see here on the lower part. Don't remember the torque spec, but I think it's somewhere around 26 foot-pounds for those. And those I did it all by hand instead of using the impact. I don't always use my impact, only when it saves me some time. VTEC solenoid's going on now. There's only a few fasteners to hold that on. Not a bad idea to replace that gasket. That screen can get clogged up sometimes. It doesn't happen often, but causing VTEC problems. But I don't normally see too many VTEC problems other than low or incorrect oil is what I mostly see with VTEC problems. If you get a check engine light for VTEC, good possibility it's that. Now we're reconnecting our hoses, the fresh air for the PCV, hooking that back up. There's a couple of coolant lines that are back there, heater hose that needs to come around, and now we're coming in with the starter. And we are virtually done here. Isn't that cool? I mean, we had a whole lot of fun with this. Once we run the starter down, we can get a closer look at what we got here. Back to you, Eric.
All right. Got the transmission in. Pretty much everything that we're going to get in right now before we drop it in. Got a little stuff under the intake. I had to put a new PCV valve on. The NOx sensor broke, so when you do these, be very careful about the NOx sensor because that was very brittle, and I just went to pull the connector off and the whole thing came apart. Also, if I were to do this again, I just would have removed this whole box instead of trying to take the hose out of the PCV valve, because the PCV valve had the same thing. There's a lot of heat under here, and things get really brittle. So if you try to take them apart, it may not come apart. So I ended up having to buy a PCV valve and a NOx sensor, and these are expensive because of that. So beware of that. Other than that, new oil filter. You got to see the timing belt in another video. New exhaust manifold. The old one was cracked. Had the O2 sensor in. Everything is pretty much tip-top. Did the valve adjustment on it. We're just waiting to go, really. Which will be the next time, next week. I'll drop this thing in there and we'll roll this bad boy right out of here. Now, some of you might be saying, Eric, I don't like the fact that you took it apart and put it together with a 3/8 impact. You'd be right. There are better ways of doing it. Of course, there are torque specs for everything. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say there are times, in my opinion, when that kind of work is warranted. I was a flat rate technician for years, and basically what that means is I get paid on what I do. So in other words, say for instance this engine job might bill 6 hours. If I can do it at 4, I just made good money, and I also open up time to do other work. And you learn what corners you can cut, and I learned that I can turn down my 3/8 impact to a point where it's not going to break the heads off of bolts. Now, sometimes that will happen, and then you'll have to deal with it, and it'll cost you even more time. What they say is a stitch in time saves 9, and that's true. That's very true. So, am I going to tell you not to do what I did here? No, because probably a lot of you already do. But I'm going to say that I have a great deal of experience doing this. I've changed more than one engine, as you've seen, and I know these engines. I know Hondas extremely well, and I've done this dance I don't know how many times, but I don't often put engines in Civics, but I've done it all. But aside from the point, enough about me. The point is, I feel comfortable doing what I did. I feel comfortable that it's going to work. Eric, you also reused the old gaskets. This is a used car from a used car salesman that his daughter drives. That should tell you something. In other words, he didn't want to put any money into it. Which means I'm not going to put a whole lot of time into it because my extra effort is not necessarily going to pay off. But I believe what I did will work, and I'm okay. And if something goes wrong, it's on me. Okay, you know, I'm totally there. But if you want to throw the bad comments at me, go ahead, have fun. I hope it makes you feel better. But I just wanted to, you know, give you a quick little runaround of what I was doing with this. And, you know, like I said before in the last video, if I wanted to do this as a fastener by fastener account, like I do with my pay videos, well, that would have taken me a lot longer. But on this particular job, I didn't have it in me. And I got to tell you, working on cars is one thing, but working on cars and filming them at the same time, especially when you're here by yourself, that can be kind of challenging. I feel like I'm making excuses, and I don't want to make excuses. I'm basically just going to tell you, I did it this way this time because I did it this way this time. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're able to get something from it. I hope you like the little timing belt video that I made for you, free of charge. I know it was out of the car, all that kind of thing, but you know what? That's why you pay for the other videos. Once again, I feel like I'm justifying. I love you guys, and I know a lot of you love me, so, you know, there's a give and take. And I'm happy with that. But I got to get my butt home. I'm tired, and I got a long day tomorrow. So I'm Eric the Car Guy. You can always visit me at EricTheCarGuy.com or follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I also do podcasts on occasion with a guy named Rich Baxter on Sunday afternoon at noon Eastern Standard Time. On occasion, sometimes we take some time off, but for the most part, we're there doing that for you. So all kinds of Eric the Car Guy to throw at you. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. The next, we'll wrap this up by dropping that thing in, rolling this thing out of here, and clearing out my shop of all these engine jobs. And maybe we'll just do some easy work for a while. That'd be nice. Real nice. Stay dirty, people.